Then I want to introduce our third co-chair, Sjoerd Klauving from this university. Sjoerd is an associate professor at the Faculty of Humanities. He's working on the Anthropocene. He has lots of interests and a lot of, let's say, duties. One of them is that he's also the co-lead of the newly established Environmental Humanities Center here at this university. I'm very, very happy that you're here, Sjoerd, because you will be the chair of this opening plenary. So I want to give you the burden and say, Sjoerd, you are now in charge. Lead us through this open plenary and the question how we can accelerate into the future for a more sustainable future. Sjoerd, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philip. Indeed, I'm very happy also to open up this conference together with my colleagues, also from the United States and America, from Common Ground. And we're very eager also to start this conference because we have a lot of things to cover and a lot of ground to cover and also a lot of sustainability to cover. And I'm very happy also to be able to chair this keynote session with you. And we're already a bit ahead of time, which is good because then we are able also to bring us, have us more time for discussion. So we have a great series of keynotes coming up this afternoon for us and this morning for somebody else in the world, of course. So we have various time zones. We'll be featuring Marjan Minnesma, we'll be featuring Christian Felber and featuring Diederik Samson. And they all are three keynote speakers of excellent quality, which can lead us into this great 17th International Conference on Economic, Social Sustainability, Cultural, Economic, Social Sustainability. So I think it's time for me now to introduce Marjan. And Marjan Minnesma is a studied business administration, philosophy and international law. She has been campaign director for Greenpeace Netherlands, and she founded Urgenda, an organization for innovation and sustainability to make the required transitions happen. And Urgenda actually worked as a front runner on solutions, from the first collective buying initiative for solar panels to the first electric car produced in series. In order to further speed up the transition process, she brought the government to court, together with almost 900 citizens, to demand more action, and she won twice. Marjan has been named the most influential person working in the field of sustainability in the Netherlands and was to be declared to be a leading global thinker by the authoritative American magazine Foreign Policy. She is the chair of OM Nieuwe Energie, that's the Dutch umbrella organization of 40 local sustainable energy cooperatives. Today, we are proud that Marjan Minnesma is our first keynote speaker of the 17th International Conference on Environmental, Cultural, Economic, and Social Sustainability. Marjan, the floor is yours. I'm happy that you can be here.
I'm happy to be here too. Nice to be back. I've been working here at the Free University at the Institute for Environmental Studies roughly 15 years ago. So it has changed quite a bit since then, I've seen. And a lot has happened in the last 15 years. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. After I worked here at the Free University at the Institute for Transitions at the Erasmus University, where we at a certain point had 30 different people doing their PhD on all kinds of transition topics. And I told my colleague, Professor Rotmans, it's nice that there are so many books now, but what do we really change in real life? And that was how Urgenda started, because we felt challenged to use the knowledge from the science to make a change in the Netherlands and to accelerate sustainability as quickly as possible. So I've tried to put my slides on now. Are they somewhere? Yeah. Thank you. So we started with Urgenda in 2007. And at that point, we thought with the transition theory, we need to assist frontrunners to scale up, to try to move as quickly as possible. And we also tried to make a movement of frontrunners and people that wanted to make the transition as quickly as possible. But while doing that, we saw that there were quite a few things that nobody was taking up, and we tried to fill in those gaps. And I give you a few examples of those. In 2008, there were hardly any electric vehicles. There were only a few that were actually combustion engine vehicles, of which the old engine was taken out and an electromotor was put in, which was not really sustainable, we thought. But there was one company in Norway at that time that was making full-fledged electric vehicles, and that were also 95% made of renewable materials. And we thought that that was very interesting, and we convinced them to bring those cars to the Netherlands. And we sold them to the city of Amsterdam and to a couple of other big cities, which then had hundreds of vehicles and thought, now we need charging stations. And then they started to tender for charging stations. And that is how in the Netherlands, the market for electric vehicles opened up. And we then thought, how can we accelerate it more? Let's see if we can get a lot of big companies that have large fleets of cars and buy together electric vehicles and make them cheaper. So we had roughly 50 big companies together, and we thought, we're now going to do it. And then I made a very big mistake, because two of the ministers of the Netherlands said, we want to join. We, as the Netherlands, want to add 800 vehicles. And at that time, I thought that that was a nice idea. But when the national government comes in, then you need to do an international buying in with a lot of lawyers and so on. And it took more than 2 years before you could even start buying cars. So I learned from that project that I would never do it that way again, and keep the group as small as possible when you organize something, and don't get the government in the middle of your project. So that didn't work out, but what did work out was that hundreds of people in the Netherlands that were in that project learned about electric vehicles much quicker than they would normally have, and a lot of these companies did buy, in the end, electric vehicles on their own. So we did accelerate the market for electric vehicles, but in another way than we had foreseen. So the next thing thereafter was that we saw that there were hardly any solar panels at that time in the Netherlands, and we thought, there's thousands of people that apply for subsidy schemes, and the subsidy was at that time usually within 1 hour gone, and all those people would then wait for another year. And we thought, if we combine them and we buy together, can we then bring the price down so that you don't even need a subsidy? And I had people that I knew in China that were working there for the solar industry, and they informed for me and came back after a few weeks and said, if you buy 50,000 solar panels, which was 10 megawatt at that time, and the inverters all together, then you can bring the price 1/3 down compared to the market price at that time. So it appeared to be the first solar initiative that was a joint buying initiative in Europe, which I didn't know at that time. And we said, okay, we're going to try it. And we asked people to join us, pay 20% upfront, so we know that you're serious. And within 3 weeks, I had a new bank account with 5 million euros. Thousands of people that simply believed me on, as we say here in the Netherlands, on my blue eyes. I had never sold one solar panel before, but they simply thought, I trust this lady and we're going to do it. So they all put 20% in that bank account, and we made the order for 50,000 solar panels. But normally you pay upfront, and then they send the solar panels with a boat to the Netherlands, and then you bring it to your customers. So normally there's 6 weeks in between. Then you have to go to a bank for an interim loan. And I thought, I have already sold them. I have 20% in the bank account, so that will not be much of a problem. But that was not true. But if you go to a bank, then they say, have you done it before? No. Do you have money of your own? No, 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 no. And I couldn't get any loan. So I flew to China, and I showed to the people over there, look, I have sold your panels and the inverters. I have so much in the bank account, but I can't get this interim loan. Can you help me? And they said, that's interesting, because the subsidy schemes are going down everywhere, and joint buying initiatives might be a new business model. So we help you. We give you a few cents per watt peak, which is the jargon for solar panels, additional discount, and you have to pay us only 3 weeks after the solar panels have arrived in the Netherlands. So we emailed everybody and said, we're going through, and if you pay us a little bit early, before you have even seen them, then you get an additional discount of 50 euros. And then everybody paid us. So when the solar panels were still at sea, we had 20 million in the bank account, which was quite new to me too. So in the end, we did this initiative. And thereafter, a lot of people thought, oh, buying initiatives together, that's a nice model. And we had copycats all over the Netherlands. And we really opened up at that time the market for solar panels. And thereafter, it went very quickly. But when we were doing this, it now sounds quite easy, but it was not at all, because when the boat was at sea, then we had a nuclear problem somewhere in the world, as you might remember, and the boat had to take another route, and it ended up 5 days later in Europe. And then all the lorries that I had ordered to bring the solar panels to the people were gone, because they don't wait for 5 days, which I didn't know. So I have had many of those problems, but in the end we solved them all, and it appeared that I like this entrepreneurial way of doing things very much. And in the Netherlands, this really accelerated the market for solar panels a lot. On top of that, we also made in the same period a book which we have renewed in 2012, 17 and 19 on how the Netherlands could become a country on 100% solar energy in 2030. Which in 2012 sounded like we still have 18 years to go, might be possible, but now it's only 10 years, and now it sounds for most people as something that's impossible. And this is impossible in the normal Dutch way. It's even impossible under a so-called transition management way of acting, because that's supposed to take 2 generations. So it should be really handled as a crisis. And that means a completely different approach, but it is still possible. And for Urgenda, we are working on the solutions that we have described in this book. So I give you one example. We have examples on housing, on mobility, on every different sector of the Netherlands. But one of the things that we did first was the housing sector. In the Netherlands, people with a house of their own for the next 15 years will roughly pay 35,000 euros on energy. So that's what you throw away on energy bills. I thought if you bring this money up front and you can make a house energy neutral, which means that you don't have an energy bill anymore. And if you have to borrow the money, you can pay it back in 15 years' time for the same amount per month as what you now pay for your energy. So your monthly cost will not go up. At that time, nobody did that, and no company would want to do that. We started in 2012, and by now we have done hundreds of houses, and this is possible, we can now tell you. But our official institutes still write that it costs much more and that it is not feasible. And because we don't have scientific peer-reviewed research to show them, look, this is what we have done already for the past 8 years, those official institutes don't believe you. So scientists are extremely important for us to show to those institutes that this is possible, because only when it's peer-reviewed in science, then it's real. To me, that's sometimes quite frustrating, because therefore those institutes are always 5 years later. But it's also good, I think, to know that you have an important role to show to institutes and therefore to government that things are possible, which otherwise go much slower. Well, we did a lot of different projects with Urgenda, trying to push things and accelerate, open up markets. But after 5-6 years, I looked backwards and I thought, are we moving quickly enough? And my conclusion was no. So I thought we need, on top of what we keep doing, additional things. And the 3 things that I thought were necessary was physical protest. And at that time, that was before all the large marches and so on. The divestment movement, which just started around 2012, and the court case. And I go into those very briefly. You saw at a certain point of time, the marches were coming up. We organized here in the Netherlands the first People's Climate March, and we did a lot of other things in this field. We walked from the middle of the Netherlands to Paris before the conference in Paris, 620 kilometers with thousands of people, and we brought the Dutch TV, the Dutch broadcasting TV on main TV stations with us, and they sent every day 10 minutes on main time. So we had a lot of information that we could spread the whole month. We talked about climate and energy, climate and water, climate and agriculture, and so on, and therefore could, well, spread the news. And I'm very happy with both the young people that go to the streets every Friday, and people from Extinction Rebellion. I think it's very much necessary in these times that we don't do only a retweet or a like, but that we make it visible and show the people in power that we want to change. Well, the divestment movement said we can only burn so much oil, coal, and gas, and then we have burned too much for the 1.5 or 2 degrees warming to prevent that. And it started in America with a lot of universities that spend money and invest in oil, coal, and gas. And I was here at the Free University with a lot of young people that asked from this institute to make sure that the pension funds that all people that work here must be part of, that this pension fund also starts to change its investment policies. And this whole movement was taken over by one of my colleagues, which now has an NGO of her own, and is still doing this. And I think it's a powerful threat. And then our court case. In 2012, we started with telling our government, you have said within the framework of the Climate Change Convention that industrial countries need to reduce CO2 between 25 and 40% in 2020. You have signed for that in hundreds of documents. Well, please do this. And then I received a letter back from the government that said, we agree completely with you, Urgenda. Climate change is a big problem with enormous negative consequences, but we don't want to be a front runner, which was very funny because we were at that time one but the last in Europe on renewable energy, and we are one of the largest emitters in the world. So we are not small, and we are certainly not close to being a front runner. So we had our dialogue, and then at that time we could start with this court case. Well, the government of the Netherlands, of course, said we are only very small, so please, judge, don't do this because it doesn't have any effect on climate. I think it's good to know that the Netherlands are among the 20% largest emitters. On this picture, you see the size of China and of America indicate that they are large emitters, but the Netherlands is also a very large emitter. Let's see if I can make the Netherlands shown. This is the Netherlands here. So we are among the 20% largest emitters, but that's not really fair if you compare yourself to, for example, China with more than 1 billion people, and we only have 17.5 million. So it's more fair to look at it per person. And from this group of large emitters, we are in the top 10 of per capita emissions. We emit more per person than China, India, and other big countries. So I think the Netherlands is a very big country in climate change and should set an example. So in our court case, we said, as a country, you have a duty of care to protect your citizens. And the good thing about the whole court case that took almost 8 years was that the government never said that it was not true that climate change is very dangerous. So the fact that we have what's called unlawful hazardous negligence, so that there is a very serious problem, was not debated. The only thing that the Dutch government was saying all the time is, there might be a big problem, but we have the freedom not to act. And we said, that's not true. We can go to court and demand from the judges to protect us against an almighty government. That's the balance of power. That's what we call in the Netherlands the trias politica. So we thought this was the basis of our case, whereas the government said that it was absolutely unthinkable that a judge would be in the chair of the politicians. Well, in the end, we won, so they were not right. There is a duty of care to protect your citizens, and because the Dutch government have signed hundreds of documents that they should reduce between 25 and 40%, there was also a standard of care. And the fact that we had this standard made it possible to win this case. It was very important. And the judges said, well, maybe the 40% is necessary. For what we have heard from Urgenda, that might be very necessary, but that's up to politics. But the 25%, the lowest level, is something that we guard. So you should reduce in 2020 at least 25% and start immediately, which they didn't do. And I think it's good to realize that we did not ask for anything very spectacular, because when we won in 2015, we were here, and the government had an own goal for 2030 that was 49% less emissions. So if you draw a straight line, you can see that our goal in the court case is on this line. So we're actually more or less asking, do what you have promised, do what you want to do yourself. And still all the years before 2020, they emitted more than, they were above this line. So they were not on track for their own goal and also not on track for our goal. Well, then they went to the Court of Appeal, and they had 29 grounds of appeal, which were all one by one slashed by the judges as not correct. And because they went to this court, we thought, well, then we have one counter appeal, because the first court had said, because Urgenda is not a human, they cannot refer to the Convention on Human Rights. And we said, well, maybe we cannot go to the Court on Human Rights, but we can refer to the Convention on Human Rights. And the second court said, Urgenda is right. There is also a duty of care based on this Convention on Human Rights. So then we had more or less two legs to stand on. The first one was based on civil law, and the second one was based on international human rights law. So the Dutch government should now start to act, which they didn't do again. And we thought, now they appeal again to the Supreme Court, and we must show the court that it's still possible what we have asked for. So we made a plan first with 40 solutions, and later on we added up to 54 solutions together with more than 800 organizations to show that if they would take all kinds of small measures, that it was still possible to reach the 25% reduction in 2020. And this was a coalition for every step. So the 800 organizations were mixed in all kinds of different coalitions. And they all said, we want to help to make this work. So they also offered assistance to the governments to make the 25% possible. And I thought that that was important also to show to the Supreme Court that if they would say Urgenda wins, that they would not think that it was something impossible. Because by the time we went back, it was almost 2020. Well, this shows that all those small steps, which you don't have to read, would add up to 17 megaton of reduction, which would be enough to reach the goals. And the year thereafter, it would be more than 26 megaton. So it would also help for their own goals in 2030. Well, the Supreme Court on the 20th of December 2019, so just before 2020 started, said Urgenda is right. There is a duty of care, and the standard of care is 25% reduction in 2020, and you now have to act. And then finally they woke up. So in April this year, they said, okay, we close one coal-fired power plant, which is now already closed for a year. They have offered money to a second one to close there, and that one will most likely be closed this year. Then the remaining two new ones will then are not allowed to use their coal-fired power plants for more than 35% of their capacity of coal. And there is a law coming at the moment and most likely this will be coming in the next few months. So there will be two closed and two in the end on 35% of their capacity. And of our 54 different measures, they selected 30, which they are now implementing. So in total, more than 3 billion euros additionally to reach our goals. And because of the COVID-19 crisis, I think they might have reached last year this goal, but it should be structural. So if COVID-19 is more or less under some kind of control and we have more economic activities, then the emissions might go up again, and then they have to take additional measures because they should stay on the 25% less emissions forever. So based on this, we made an international network on climate litigation, and we have been assisting the Irish case, which also won at their Supreme Court. A few weeks ago in France, a big case was won, which we have assisted to some extent. There was another one in France in November, and there's actually hundreds going on in the world, and we are assisting many of them. So we really sparked hope with our case, but we also helped people to use climate change litigation as a new strategy for change. And I think it's really working and helping already in many places in the world. So finally, I think there is a very important role for scientists, especially for acceleration. As you saw with the houses that we make energy neutral, we need that scientists say this is correct. Urgenda is making them energy neutral for a payable price. We need this peer-reviewed article. We also used many scientists for our court case. We went to the best scientists in the world on climate change to get the arguments right before the court. And I think it's important to keep going together and make things work. Well, the University of St. Louis in Brussels gave Urgenda an honorary doctorate, so not the person, but the foundation. So it's now Dr. Urgenda, which is kind of funny. I've never seen that in the Netherlands, but in Belgium that's possible. So we're very honored, mainly for our work on the court case, but also for the rest we are doing. We need it to change within 10 years. And I know it's possible if we really want to, and I hope that you are all among the crazy people that are really going to do this. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Marjan. It was a real great opening and a very stimulating talk also. I think we all need to take example, of course, of your great action mode in bringing governments to court, because that's what it takes nowadays, of course, to integrate climate change, but also your interesting also your personal ambition and also your energy in inquiring big funds with larger groups of people and making actually also things happen. And I think that's exactly what people, this hope that people are needing also to make things happen in a transition and to see that you can actually make things going on and make sustainability also going on. So that it was an excellent, it was an excellent talk. So I think